Civilians from the city of Kherson, the first big city to fall to Russia at the start of its invasion of Ukraine in February. Ukrainian forces have been steadily retaking territory near Kherson, which is a strategically important port, giving access to the Black Sea. Well, elsewhere in Ukraine, more than 1,000 towns and villages are now without power after Russian air strikes. President Zelensky says 30% of Ukraine's power stations have been destroyed in the past 8 days. Sylvia Lennon-Spence reports.
Children, the elderly, even family pets, waiting for their turn to be taken to safety. This is the southern city of Kherson, occupied by Russian forces since February. Civilians there have begun to leave amid warnings it could become a bloody new front line.
For the last 2 weeks, we have been insisting on evacuating part of the Kherson region. I ask you to interpret my words seriously. We won't abandon the city and will stand until the end.
Kherson is a crucial strategic and symbolic target for Ukraine's government. And for the past few weeks, Ukrainian forces have been gaining ground. The man charged with halting this fight back is General Sergei Surovikin.
Just the most thumb motherfucker you could find, by the way. Just the leader of the
Nicknamed
thumb
General
army.
Armageddon, he was recently appointed Russia's top commander in Ukraine. But in his first televised interview since taking the role, he seemed to offer a rare acknowledgement of Russian difficulties.
The situation in the area of the special military operation can be described as tense. The enemy...
My man's still saying special military operation. Respect. I mean, at a certain point, you got to slip up, right? It's wild that these motherfuckers never do. How are you so committed to the bit, dude? These guys are all Upright Citizens Brigade improv masters. Special military operation is going well. And also, we're just evacuating people with the special military operation. Wild to consider how it has been this long. Aren't your mods a former cops in the chat? Cops are necessary just like mods? Yeah, I'm not a abolish the police department across the board, Andy, okay? Shut the fuck up. I'm a cop defender because they're necessary.
is not abandoning its attempts to attack Russian troop positions.
Facing such staunch resistance, Moscow has identified a new objective away from the front lines: the devastation of Ukraine's electricity supply. More than 1,000 towns and villages across the country are without power, and millions face the prospect of a freezing winter.
It's scary. I don't know how to prepare. Seems like we will be sitting without light and in cold.
Moscow seems intent on causing maximum chaos to achieve its goals, which means civilians and critical infrastructure are now squarely in the firing line. Sylvia Lennon-Spence, BBC News.
Well, let's talk to BBC's Hugo Bashega, who's in Kyiv. And before we talk about the attacks that are going on across Ukraine, Hugo, and the impact, what is the importance and the significance of what's going on in that southern port city of Kherson, which Russia took so early in its invasion?
It's very significant, Karin. This is one of the largest Ukrainian cities in Russian hands, and the Ukrainians are carrying out this counter-offensive to retake Kherson. And in the last few weeks, the Ukrainians have recaptured dozens of villages near Kherson. And now I think the expectation is that the Ukrainian forces will continue to move along the Dnipro River and try to retake this very strategic city. Now, it's believed that between 15,000 to 20,000 Russian forces are positioned in that part of the country. And there is the threat that they could become encircled and supply lines could be cut off. So it is very significant what is happening there. And we're hearing those reports from local authorities announcing the evacuation of civilians from the Kherson region. And tens of thousands of people live in that area. So it is something that we've been watching very closely for weeks now. It seems that there is a news blackout in that area imposed by the Ukrainians. So it's really difficult to independently confirm what's happening there. But we're hearing reports from Russian officials and also from Ukrainian authorities that are suggesting that fighting is intensifying, and that could be the next chapter in this Ukrainian counteroffensive.
That figure of 30% of Ukraine's power stations hit by Russian attacks in just the last 8 days. Hugo, that really is a startling figure for a country the size of Ukraine. As winter arrives, how is Ukraine going to handle this?
Yeah, this is a major concern here because the Russians have been attacking critical civilian infrastructure across the country. We heard yesterday from officials who said thousands of towns and villages across the country were without power. Rolling blackouts are happening in parts of the country. And a senior official yesterday went on television to tell people that winter is going to be hard. And residents are being told to reduce their electricity consumption during the night. People are buying generators. So I think there is a huge level of concern here that the system may not cope as a result of those attacks. As you said, a third of this country's power stations have been destroyed, according to President Zelensky. And I think this is going to be a major issue in the months ahead. It gets incredibly cold here in Ukraine, and obviously a major concern that power, water and heating services could be disrupted as a result of those attacks. And the Ukrainians are saying that this is the way Russia is responding to military setbacks on the battlefield, by attacking civilian targets and civilian infrastructure in cities across the country, including the capital, Kyiv, a city away from the front lines. But I think what is interesting is that if you talk to people here, there is no sense of panic, Karen. I think people are really angry that, again, civilian sites and civilians have become the target in this war.
Hugo, thank you. Hugo Bashega in.
I mean, civilians have been the target from the jump. Civilians are always targeted in the war. Always. For more in the they will always be the victims of war. And what Russia is doing is like extra bad. That's the difference. You always have civilian casualties in war, no matter what you do, no matter how careful you are. There's no such thing as like a careful war, right? That's why we say war is bad across the board. That's why I'm anti-war across the board. But there is also, it can only get worse. It can go from bad to horrifyingly bad, right? There is no good. There's no good in that. And when we talk about states waging war against other states, Russia is becoming increasingly more unhinged. They were insanely unhinged from the jump, and it's only gotten worse. And my fear is that these evacuations that are happening at the precipice of an escalation. I hope that is not the case, but I am very fearful of that reality.
War. We are joined now by John Kirby. He is the coordinator for strategic communications at the National Security Council at the White House, also a retired admiral in the U.S. Navy. Admiral Kirby, good morning. Thank you for being here. We've seen strikes on civilians, strikes on women and children, and now we are confronting the possibility of a deep humanitarian crisis, people freezing to death, going without water. There's a perennial question for White Houses like yours. Is there a line here, or are we just going to let people suffer?
Well, we're going to continue to make sure we're supporting Ukraine as best we can.
Yeah, the line was always drawn. The line hasn't actually changed since the beginning of the war, by the way. That's what people don't understand, I think. Like, the Western nation line is directly at Article 5. The Western nation line on this matter stops and ends at the fucking Ukrainian border. All right? They'll pump as much guns into the country as possible, but they're not going to go beyond that. They're not going to push beyond that, because pushing beyond that is always going to mean nuclear fallout. And that's not my perspective. That's not my take. That's the take of the American State Department. They have said it time and time again. You can get mad at me if you want, but that is where they're at. You ever listen to any news sources that don't suck Zelensky's dick at every possible occasion? How does it feel to be wrong about every single aspect of this war from the jump? You're a defender of Russian involvement in Ukraine, and you're saying that I'm too pro-Ukraine. I feel like I get people from either side of this conversation, which means I must be at least like covering a matter this complex with the delicate nature and with the complexities and the seriousness that it deserves. Because, like, you got fucking pro-Russian motherfuckers who are literally like, you are sucking Zelensky's cock. And then you got everyone else, which is like overwhelmingly NATO dick riders saying, I am a Putin apologist. No matter what happens. No, he didn't forget to cancel his subscription. I'm the only fucking, I'm the only person who offers a genuine anti-imperialist perspective, probably, but which he mistakes for pro-Russian policies when it's not. When I first read this, I literally thought he was going to be another NATO dick rider being like, you've been wrong every single moment of this fucking war. Turns out it's not. He's not even a NATO dick rider. He's just a Putin dick rider, I guess. I've seen way more people say you go too hard on Zelensky. Nobody's happy. You must be onto something. Yeah. And people were mad that I was talking about the fucking QVC shit that happened on CNN yesterday with Raytheon. Like, what's the problem? Raytheon should be making money. They're actually killing fascists. They're killing fascists. It's great. They're fascist killing bombs. I want to know what his perspective is. I want to know what else he's going to say. But he's not saying anything else.
We can. The United States is the largest contributor of financial and economic assistance for humanitarian purposes like this to Ukraine. We're also the largest contributor of security assistance, now $17 billion worth of weapons and capabilities to allow them to continue to defend their territory and to take some of those towns and villages back. And they're very much in the fight right now, both in the east and the south, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that they can stay in that fight.
We are the largest contributor, and I want to get to the money question in a moment, but is there a line or a zone, a way of thinking where the U.S. intervenes in a deeper way than it is currently? Not just money, not just arms.
There's obviously the president's been very clear. We're not going to put U.S. troops on the ground to fight in Ukraine. We are going to do everything we can, as we have now for going on 8 months, to make sure that the Ukrainian armed forces have what they need in the field. And that,
I mean, yeah, there you go. That has not changed since day one, and it is not going to change. For people who are saying, why not? You don't understand. I don't think. This is something that I've been saying since the jump as well. If you're not going to go to fucking full-blown nuclear conflict, which I don't want you to go to either, then you have to fucking provide some kind of treaty as an option, and not just consistently be like, no, we're just going to keep giving weapons. We're going to keep giving weapons. We're going to keep giving weapons and hope for the best. Because at that point, you're just throwing Ukrainian lives in the fucking fold. Which, I mean, look, at this stage, I have no analysis beyond this. Like, this is what happened. This is what happened with the no-fly zone discourse as well. The U.S. has nothing to do with the treaty anyway. It's Ukraine's decision. Yeah, I don't think that is as true as you think it is. Let's be real. Everyone understands that Ukraine would not be standing in the way that it is. It would still put up a very serious fight even without Western involvement, because it's, again, a 44 million strong country. Nation statehood depends on emancipation from Russia, okay? But the reality is the reason why Ukraine has been able to put up a strong fight is because of NATO involvement, is because of Western involvement. What Ukrainians want and desire is a righteous cause, emancipation. Don't fucking put that in quotes. That is true. That is what it is. Get the fuck out of here. You're being ridiculous. Come the fuck on. They are under brutal occupation in Eastern territories by an irredentist force. That's just the truth. Come on. You have to recognize that. So in that process, wanting to escape that is a just cause. I recognize it, just like I also recognize that without Western involvement, the battlefield would not look the way it does currently. There is no line for the U.S. and NATO from the angle of humanitarianism. Ukrainian lives are utterly irrelevant in their calculations. The only line is as far as they can take self-interest without the most severe consequences. Well, I don't even think that they give a shit about the most severe consequences. It seems like they don't. Because if they did, they would apply pressure in the opposite direction. Same with China for Russian involvement. Same with OPEC alliances with Russian involvement. There are other factors at play here that Ukraine could not operate without, and that Russia could not operate without as well. Obviously, Russia has more of an equal say in the partnerships that I described because Russia is a more powerful country than Ukraine. Ukraine, on the other hand, does not have as big as an equal share in the victories in battle that they have foreseen, and therefore have less of a say in the overarching, in the ultimate treaty that comes along. What I mean by that is, if tomorrow NATO decided to stop arming Ukraine, Ukraine would take significant losses, even with the current insanely fucking withered state of the Russian conventional forces. Therefore, of course, Western powers have a lot of influence in what ends up happening with Ukrainian decisions. But diplomacy has never been on the table as a even point of conversation from a single Western leader in a position of power. It is not. The only people that have actually engaged in diplomacy early on, who now say there is no shot that they can ever engage in diplomacy, is the Ukrainians. Ukrainian leadership have tried time and time again, especially early on, to engage in diplomatic talks. The last most successful version of that was a 15-point plan that Zelensky had come up with. Don't say that's not true. It's 100% true. Ukraine had come to the table in Antalya, and those peace talks, or rather ceasefire talks, completely got destroyed. They got eviscerated. The timing of that evisceration was rather suspicious. It was right after Boris Johnson went to Ukraine.
Just isn't coming from the United States. We're also literally leading and coordinating international efforts to get additional weapons and capabilities into their hands.
I'm not talking about the Minsk agreements that predate the Russian invasion. I'm talking post-Russian invasion.
Sometimes, in many cases, capabilities that they know better and can use faster than even the ones that we're providing from our own stock. So we're going to stay at this. You've heard the president talk about that. As long as it takes, we're committed to that.
As long as it takes. So let's talk about the money component on the subject of as long as it takes. By our count, it's nearly $100 billion in aid to Ukraine. I know we're not the only country kicking in, but at a time when there are a lot of taxpayer needs here, is there a line for the White House where you're not going to spend taxpayer money there?
We have had great support from both sides of the aisle in Congress over the course of the last eight months. Terrific support. I think everybody realizes what's at stake here, which is more than just, the town of Kherson or Kharkiv or Sloviansk. It's really about this idea of sovereignty, and it's really about what the security environment in Europe is going to look like going forward. It has changed today, and it affects the United States and our national security interests, because so many of our allies and partners are now in a different security footprint than they were before. We have 20,000 more troops on the European continent now than we did, again, 8 months ago. So we're working this very, very hard, and we're going to stay at it.
Admiral, House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy, on the subject of support from Congress, he said if the Republicans take control, they're not going to write a blank check for Ukraine in the new year. Is he going to get a phone call from you today?
This has not been about writing blank checks for Ukraine. This has been about bipartisan support in Congress to continue to.
Look at this. Look. This person has been prodding so hard. Even he is calling out yet more than everyone else so far and saying Ukraine not asking to be anyone involved in nuclear war. However, the supply of arms is something that is not up to Ukrainians. So do you support that no matter how bad the MIC is? Ukraine should receive weapons. I think Ukraine should receive weapons that are tracked, traceable, and not untraceable and untracked, because those weapons are inevitably going to end up in the black market, which it has already. America has no way of fucking holding anyone accountable for any of those weapon sales. I think that the ultimate reality is that no one really gives a shit about the lives of Ukrainians. And if you think that Raytheon is actually selling their fucking weapons specifically for some humanitarian purpose, you are the most delusional motherfucker I've ever heard in my entire life. America has also 100% allowed Ukraine to be able to defend itself with the weapons and the arms sales that America is engaging in when they fucking when they basically give Ukraine money and then take that money and pump it back into American military industrial complex companies, corporations. But those weapons should also come with certain conditions. Those weapons already do come with those conditions, actually. Those weapons also come with the condition that America gets to have a say in what you do with your negotiations process. That is the truth. So the fact that Ukraine has seen no negotiations process, or the fact that Ukrainian negotiations have led to nowhere, really. The Ukrainian leadership's positions on negotiations have led to absolutely nothing, is partially on America. So you can't say I'm America-centric in my analysis and then fucking openly state that, like, that we're funneling billions of dollars of arms into Ukraine. Why does America not want negotiations to pursue? I think there is no clear answer for this, obviously, but I personally think They do not want negotiations to pursue, specifically because they're making a lot of money for Raytheon, for Lockheed Martin, for Boeing, and for everyone else. You just keep selling more weapons. Why'd you ban them? Oh, anyway, he said not supplying weapons to Ukraine, however, means more deaths. So should Western supply powers or not? And then he goes, from what I understand, Hasan is unwilling to take a stance on supplying weapons to Ukraine to appease his pro-Putin chatters. So you're pro-Ukraine receiving it in those conditions. You're not America centrist. You're appeasing pro-Putin chatters. This person has an agenda. I'm going to unban him because I want to hear their fucking psychotic ramblings further. Their agenda is to say I'm pro-Putin or I'm appeasing pro-Putin chatters. Why? If I am pro-Putin, why do I routinely say Putin is a fucking bloodthirsty monster who's also insanely idiotic? If anything, being pro-Putin from the West is quite literally celebrating Putin's actions because NATO generals get to end up making a fucking killing. Look at John Kirby and how excited he is talking about how there's 20,000 additional security forces operatives inside of European borders. That is pretty fucking pro-Putin, because what Putin did in Ukraine, if you even move beyond the inhumane brutality of this occupation, is also delivering a gift wrap basket full of pretzels and chocolate covered pretzels and acai berries that are also chocolate covered to fucking the American military industrial complex. $100 billion of weapons. Yeah, that is true, by the way. The idea that like the suggestion that you would appease any chatter is laughable. That chatter literally doesn't understand what happens here on the stream. Yes, I love appeasing my chatters. By the way, there's another part of this. Obviously, Russia's own involvement. We don't even know if Russia wants to negotiate. But that shouldn't stop people from trying.
To make sure that Ukraine can defend itself and can stand up for its sovereignty, because that's really what's at stake here. Aside, of course, from the literally hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian lives that have been affected by this war. So we've had great support. We're going to continue to work hand in glove with Congress going forward for additional financial support for Ukraine, and we're confident that we're going to be able to work with them to that end.
All right, Admiral Kirby, thank you very much.
My pleasure.